What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing the second installment of our ranking series. You guys already saw the running back rankings. We're actually going to be taking on our top 12 wide receivers going into the 2021 season. Way too early edition, right after the season. Bush, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. As you said, way too early. We're going to probably say things like, I don't know what's going to happen with this free agent or that free agent, but this is what we're projecting. This is why we don't base much off of these rankings. It's just a fun exercise. As we talked about with the running back position, we're kind of just going off of rapid reaction and what we saw this past season, projecting them forward, and what our best guess is what happens in the offseason. But yeah, I'm doing good. I'm excited to get into these ones too.
For sure. Again, the wide receiver position is one that a lot of people really faded going into 2020, and that just led to a bunch of wide receivers wildly outperforming their ADPs. I mean, there's going to be a couple guys we talk about on this list specifically that were 5th, 6th, 7th round picks going into drafts last year. So just excited to really recap it and get over it. But before we do that, I'm going to hit the intro. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to start off the wide receiver position with really the tier 1 made up of 2 names. The first name of which plays for the Green Bay Packers. That is wide receiver Davante Adams. I mean, this guy is an absolute freak of nature. I mean, 18 touchdowns in just over 13 games. It says 14, but in reality, we all know he played 13 and a half because he ended up leaving against the Lions early. I mean, this guy has everything you want. He has the touchdown upside, had 1,300 receiving yards, again, in said 13 and a half games. And he's tethered to a top 2 quarterback, in my opinion, in football with what Aaron Rodgers has put on display this year. So, I mean, when you're talking about this guy's 2020 campaign, he averaged 21 and a half PPR per game, points per game, which was not only good enough for wide receiver 1, but was actually the 4th highest amongst non-quarterbacks in fantasy football. So, in my opinion, I mean, he's as much of a lock out 1 at the wide receiver position as CMC is at the running back position. I mean, you got the combination of high touchdown upside with high volume. We talked about it going into the season last year, why he was our number 1, and he put it fully on display this year. So Davante Adams, no questions asked, wide receiver 1 going into the year for me.
Yeah, and that's why we liked him better than Michael Thomas going into the season, was because we said going into to the 2019 season when Davante Adams, I believe, only played 12 games, that he had that 14, 15 touchdown type upside. And I mean, he got 18 and 13 and a half games this year. And I don't think it's really unreasonable for us to project him for 12 plus or so next year too, because the way that Aaron Rodgers trusts him in the red zone and the way that offense runs in general, it's probably going to be the same exact supporting cast around Aaron Rodgers. Maybe they add a receiver, maybe Robert Tonyan walks in free agency, who knows? But I agree. Davante Adams is the wide receiver 1. I don't think there's any question about it. I do think this next guy that we're going to talk about is in the same tier as Davante Adams, but I do think Adams, because of his volume, has a slight edge over Tyreek Hill, who is our number 2 wide receiver. If you have anything on Adams, I can just roll into Hill real quick.
I'll quickly just mention, I mean, nearly 27 full PPR points per game. So again, we mentioned the half PPR total. In full PPR, this guy was averaging nearly 27 per game. Like, that's CMC level type of upside on any given week. I mean, it's just incredible what he was able to put on display in 2020. But anyways, let's get into number 2, the end of our tier 1, and that's going to be Tyreek Hill, the only real other receiver we can advocate for taking within top 7 or 8 type picks going into 2021.
Yeah, I think if you built a big board right now based on what we know, I think both of these guys are in the top 8 total picks because of what they give you and because of how safe they are in terms of how we can project them going forward. We already talked about it with Adams, but you said a top 2 quarterback in football. Well, the other 2 quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes, with Andy Reid as the play caller, with Travis Kelce over the middle, Clyde Edwards-Helaire maybe making some steps forward, Sammy Watkins is a free agent. That could lead to some more things for Tyreek Hill as well. This is the most feared player in fantasy football, in my opinion, because we saw it against Tampa Bay. This dude can put up 50 points. This is a receiver capable of putting up 50 points, and he is coming off of a 15-touchdown season tethered to the right arm of the NFL's best quarterback. The only reason that Tyreek Hill would bust for fantasy purposes next year is if he gets injured or Mahomes gets injured. No concerns about his offense whatsoever. Even if there is some injuries on the Chiefs' offense, I have the offense is going to run as long as Mahomes and Hill are healthy. His involvement in the offense is really pretty simple. He's like a 140 target type of guy year in and year out. His play caller, his quarterback play, none of those things I have questions about. If Tyreek is on the field, he is an absolute lock for 1,200 plus yards, and he's an absolute lock for double-digit touchdowns. He has the upside, too, of a Davante Adams-like season where he has 18, 20 touchdowns, similar to what an elite running back can produce. You mentioned Davante Adams had the fourth highest points per game total of any non-quarterback in half PPR. Tyreek gives you that same kind of output because we know this guy's virtually a touchdown per game type of guy with the quarterback he plays with.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, again, we mentioned the common theme between these two wide receivers is the right arms of their quarterbacks. I mean, if we're projecting
for their own, we didn't even mention that they're both two of the top 5 most talented receivers in the league, too.
For sure. For sure. And again, you're talking about it. If Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers are expected to play 16 games, is there any other quarterback apart from those two that you can lock in for 35, 40 touchdowns? I don't really think there is, maybe apart from Dak, Watson, Allen's kind of in that area. But from a pure volume, passing volume standpoint, there is no other quarterbacks that really match the output of these two guys. And their number one targets were getting 25, 30% of the total targets on the team. Like, that's huge. That's huge. So, I mean, I absolutely agree. These are the two top wide receivers going into next year. Clear tier of their own. The only two that quite really have a case to be picked within the top 8 picks. Now, the third guy we're going to mention, the start of the tier 2, is an absolute stud in his own right. Top 5 talent as well at the position. And also tethered to a really good quarterback. And that's going to be Stefon Diggs, wide receiver from the Buffalo Bills. I mean, nobody can really harp against what he was able to do in 2020. 127 receptions, nearly 1,600 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns in his first season in Buffalo. I mean, he proved haters wrong, and it was an absolute league winner from the get-go. I mean, this guy was a 5th, 6th round pick going into 2020. People weren't sure about the quarterback situation with Josh Allen, oddly enough, who was probably the 3rd best quarterback in football this year. And really unsure about how Diggs would acclimate himself within the Buffalo offense in year 1. And what we saw was him absolutely emerge into his own. We've always known he's had the potential to be a stud wide receiver 1. Well, in Buffalo, that's exactly what he was. I mean, look when you're looking at it, 16.6 half PPR points per game in 2020, which actually ranked 3rd at the receiver position after those top 2. I mean, those other 2 were literally over 20 per game, so that's why there's a tier break. But, I mean, he's still tethered to a top 5 quarterback in the league, and there's really no reason to not give the man his respects amongst the elite at the wide receiver position. So, absolutely love Stefon Diggs. And, again, I mentioned those other 2 being in the top 8 overall picks. I would absolutely consider Stefon Diggs around that turn type area. So, 201, 202 is probably where I would start considering Stefon.
Yeah, and he's definitely a lesson to those of us that, and not me, because I was all over this dude. And it's probably my biggest victory of the entire offseason. But Stefon Diggs was, when it happened, I was like, okay, so Josh Allen is a top 5 fantasy quarterback locked in, right? And that was my initial reaction when Stefon Diggs was traded there. But we had a whole offseason of downplaying the move, and everyone had to rip on Josh Allen's accuracy and all that kind of stuff. But what they failed to realize is when you surround someone with a guy that can get open, your accuracy suddenly improves because it's pretty easy to hit a wide open receiver.
Sure.
So, yeah, go ahead.
When you're talking about Stefon Diggs, Josh Allen needed a receiver who can just separate. And it's quite literally, is there any better separator in the league currently than Stefon Diggs? Like, I genuinely don't think there's a better separator in the league.
I think he and Calvin Ridley and Antonio Brown in his prime, like those type of guys are they're open. They're all the time. Yeah.
For sure. So perfect fit, perfect system, and the volume is adequate enough to actually get him into this top tier. So that's going to be number 3. Who do we currently have at number 4? I know, but you can tell the audience right now.
Yeah, real quick, I'm just looking up at Stefon Diggs' target separation, and it ranks amongst the best in the league, as you probably could imagine. But DeAndre Hopkins is the next guy that we have up. Our wide receiver 4, another narrative guy that we fell victim to personally. We were all over Diggs, but we were not all over this guy. I fell victim to the wide receiver on a new team narrative, and it was flat out wrong, to be honest, because the way that Arizona involved DeAndre Hopkins in their offense last season was exactly what you could have projected. If anyone who was high on DeAndre Hopkins was like, okay, this dude is going to come in and be the alpha wide receiver. Well, he was exactly that. 29.4% target share, which is about what he had in Houston all those years that he was there. And over a 26% red zone share, which is actually higher than he ever had in Houston. This basically proves that Cliff Kingsbury from the very beginning was like the offense runs through D-Hop. Like that's exactly what their thought process was, at least the passing offense. And this is despite Hopkins and Kyler's connection not being fully developed. DeAndre Hopkins actually ranks number 54 in target quality per player profiler. And I mean, it kind of speaks a little bit to some of Kyler's inconsistencies as a passer, but it also speaks to the connection not quite being there to the point that it might have been if they had a full offseason and all that kind of stuff. So there absolutely still is upside for DeAndre Hopkins is basically my point. He could still improve on his production this past year. He could still have more touchdowns than he had, more targets, more receiving yards. A number of Hopkins metrics, number 20 in fantasy points per route run, number 56 in fantasy points per target, all indicate that he still has plenty of room to improve upon last season. And considering the limited offseason that they had last year, I definitely think he can with more and more time to work with Kyler.
For sure. And yet, we're still looking at the fact that this guy was tied for second in receptions in the entire NFL, was third in the league in receiving yards. But the one factor that was really limiting his overall upside on a week-to-week basis was that he only had 6 touchdowns. And again, another offseason, he gets to work with Kyler Murray, really gets to refine that part of his game. I do think that Kyler Murray is going to see some improvement in the touchdown passing department. I mean, if this guy were to have double-digit touchdowns next year, which is completely plausible given the talent that he has.
Considering he's done it like 5 times in his career.
I mean, we're talking about a guy, again, basically a lock for 110-plus receptions. I think that's his floor. 1,400 receiving yards is D-Hop's floor pretty much as well. And again, yeah, those touchdowns go up. Like that would make him a top 5 receiver locked and loaded. So I fully agree. Again, I have him as my wide receiver 4 as well. I believe we both do. Let me just check.
I think the only thing separating him from Kyler Murray, and I can't believe I'm saying this given what the narrative was last season, but I think separating him from Stefon Diggs is Stefon Diggs has a better quarterback right now, to be honest. And I didn't think I'd be saying that. But Stefon Diggs is in a better passing offense. So I'll take Stefon Diggs slightly over DeAndre Hopkins. But I actually think you could make an argument that this is another tier break, that these two guys might be in a tier of their own over the next couple guys. We actually do have them in the same tier, but I wouldn't be shocked if anyone wanted to make that argument. And like you said about Stefon Diggs, these two dudes, right, like back end of the first might be a bit early for them, but early second round picks, absolutely. Yeah,
fully agree. Now I'm actually going to be switching into the next guy on our list. And this is a guy who just started the season on such a rapid pace. Again, another one of those guys that you were high on as well, that 5th, 6th round area. And I mean, we're going to be talking about DK Metcalf, wide receiver from the Seahawks.
Moral of the story is shoot for ceiling in the 5th, 6th round. If you're looking at receivers, because if you took A.J. Brown in the 4th, DK Metcalf in the 4th or 5th, whenever he was going, Stefon Diggs in the 6th, like over A.J. Green or T.Y. Hilton or whoever was going there, like that's why you shoot for upside, because you could have got, if you legitimately could have drafted 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds and had A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and Stefon Diggs as your top 3 receivers. That was a plausible team comp. And another guy that fell too long, you could have had Darren Waller as your tight end in the 7th round. So imagine having a team like that. You could have went freaking Kamara, Aaron Jones, and like who the hell knows Chris Carson. Anyway.
Montgomery,
DK Metcalf, get into him.
Getting into DK Metcalf, as I said, you guys should see this on the screen roughly about now, but his first 8 games, he was phenomenal. 21.23 PPR points per game. I mean, this guy was averaging nearly 100 receiving yards and a touchdown per game. However, when the Seattle Seahawks offense went down, so did DK Metcalf, as you can see on the screen, 12.94 PPR points per game. How do those splits really compare to the PPR average per game of the top receivers in the league? Well, those first 8 games, he was on a wide receiver 3 pace, about 0.7 points per game less than the number 2 in Tyreek Hill season average, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. However, those last 8 games, that 12.94 PPR point per game clip would have been good enough for wide receiver 34. 34. Amongst receivers that actually play 10-plus games. So, I mean, when you're looking at it, yes, while the second half splits are concerning, I mean, the Seahawks offense as a whole was struggling. Russell Wilson was struggling. DK Metcalf was struggling. The team as a whole really was not the same team. And that has mostly to do really with the defenses that they were playing in that time. So as I'll outline right now, 6 of his final 8 games came against defenses that ranked top 10 against opposing wide receivers, including playing the Rams 2 times, who were first in the league, football team, Washington, second in the league, Bills, 5th in the league, Cardinals 10th in the league, and the New York Giants, who were 8th in the league. And
a lot of good shadow corners on those teams too.
Yep. The 2 outliers amongst that stretch, amongst that 8 games, was the New York Jets, who ranked 17th, in a game that Seattle went up early and actually outran the ball compared to what their passing attempts were. They ran the ball 36 times. Russ only attempted 27 passes. And the other outlier, Philadelphia, who ranked 25th against receivers, DK torched in primetime for 10 for 177. So, yes, again, the splits are concerning, but I mean, it makes sense rationally. Like, he was playing some really good teams with really good top corners that are good at shutting down opposing wide receivers. Hopefully, with some better scheduling and luck, this guy can return to what he was giving you in the top first 8 games of the season. That was a top 3 receiver. So overall, I mean, it is concerning that he plays the Rams and the Cardinals 2 times a year each, which is why he's not in that top 3 for us in our rankings. But I mean, this is a guy whose ceiling is quite literally 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns. Like, I would not be shocked if he put up that type of stat line going into next year. So he's tethered still to the right arm of Russell Wilson. I know it wasn't the same Russell Wilson in the last 8, but this is still a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the league. So I'm not concerned with DK going into next year.
Yeah, and we always talk about the third-year breakout for wide receivers. Well, DK Metcalf's going into his 3rd year, and he already broke out clearly. But you could argue that, I've heard a couple people say this, that the second-year jump from a rookie to a sophomore, generally speaking, is when players make the biggest leap in like any position, not just wide receivers. And the fact that A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin, they all didn't have off seasons to really get that work in and make that second-year leap, could have even impeded some of their progression as a player. So there's definitely still a chance that DK Metcalf is not done progressing. He could still get better, and that's a scary sight for a lot of NFL defenses. But I agree. I think the reason he's not, and I said you probably could have made another tier after Diggs and Hopkins, is because Diggs and Hopkins, I believe, would have done better with that schedule than DK Metcalf did. And we just got news that Brian Schottenheimer got fired from the Seattle Seahawks. We'll have to find out what that means. Brian Schottenheimer getting fired probably isn't a bad thing for the wide receiver position, but who knows, man? They could make Bill Callahan the offensive coordinator, and they could just go back to their run-heavy approach and draft Najee Harris in the 1st round. Who the hell knows with Seattle? But I think DK Metcalf is going to have a season closer to his first half than he does to the second half.
Yeah, fully agree. Also, you put that scenario in my head. If they did that and drafted Najee in the first round, let's say, or second round hypothetically, like we'll just say they drafted Najee Harris, who do you think would go ahead in drafts, Najee Harris or DK Metcalf?
I would take Najee Harris ahead of DK Metcalf if that happened.
Which is crazy because like right now DK.
Assuming Chris Carson's a free agent, so assuming Chris Carson's gone and they have Najee Harris and like Carlos Hyde and like whoever else is on the roster still. Yeah, I would take Najee. If Najee Harris went to the Seahawks, he'd be probably a back end of the 1st round fantasy pick.
Yeah, I agree. So, anyways, that doesn't take anything away from DK. That just shows you the potential scenario if Najee Harris landed on that type of team.
Yeah, which I think that about the range in the draft where Najee is going to go is about where the Seahawks actually they don't pick there because they don't have a 1st round pick, but the 2nd round pick that they have, they could trade up. Who knows? They already picked the running back in the 1st round. Maybe Rashad Penny can show something. Anyway, Calvin Ridley, next guy that we have on the list here. This definitely hinges on Matt Ryan returning to the Atlanta Falcons. But as of right now, I think that it's become time. It's time to admit that Calvin Ridley is the wide receiver 1 for fantasy in Atlanta. I know we all love Julio Jones. Me and you up until this year said Julio Jones is the most talented receiver in the NFL.
Yeah.
Age may be catching up with him a little bit. We saw him deal with some injuries last year. Generally speaking, our policy has been when players are banged up at an older age, we're usually out on them. I have a feeling Julio Jones is going to fall under that category this season if we're going to be consistent with our principles against guys like AJ Green last year, guys like Odell Beckham, not really an older player, but you get the point. Basically, all this means is that Calvin Ridley is going to be a superstar for fantasy. This is assuming Matt Ryan is still the quarterback of the Falcons. We don't expect Julio Jones to be gone from Atlanta just yet. There has been rumors that he could be potentially being shopped. We have a new general manager in the building now. Thomas Dimitroff is gone after the guy who actually traded up for Julio Jones all those years ago. He should be back, I would assume, Julio Jones, but we don't know. He could get traded. And if he's going to be healthy this season, the splits are a lot less dramatic than some people might think. They might think, oh, Calvin Ridley at 6, Julio Jones can be back next year. But Calvin Ridley with Julio Jones, as you can see on the screen right now, still is a 17.45 PPR points per game type of receiver. And that is good enough for a top 6 receiver. 17.45, yes, he scores 20 and a half when Julio's off the field. But like I mentioned, Julio Jones is an older player. He could deal with some injuries next year, or he could just flat out not be on the team next year. All that being said, too, if Julio is on the team, Ridley's performance last year was incredible, despite Atlanta only scoring the 16th most points in the NFL, which if everyone is returning to full health, I believe that improves because I still think Atlanta is a great passing offense. And I think even if Matt Ryan was gone and they drafted a Zach Wilson or a Justin Fields, I actually think they could score more points than they scored last year with that kind of supporting cast. So obviously you don't want to see Matt Ryan leave. It's probably better for Matt Ryan or for Calvin Ridley if Matt Ryan is there. But either way, Calvin Ridley is a guy that I'm willing to take as a top 6 receiver next year because he has proven time and time again that he's improved every single year as a player. He gets open just like Stefon Diggs does, and he's a very easy target for Matt Ryan, and he's tremendous scoring touchdowns. So he's exactly what you want out of a fantasy receiver that you can probably get in the 3rd round next year.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I mean, you're looking at Calvin Ridley. Again, you mentioned that total, 17.4, I believe you said? 17.4.
Yeah, 17.4. Only getting like 5 receptions a game, too. Like 8 targets a game. Like if he gets any kind of volume bump with any other kind of factors that might happen, like a passing offense throws the ball more because Matt Ryan's healthy and they have like a new coordinator or whatever, Calvin Ridley could definitely be a guy that wins people some leagues next year.
Oh, no, I fully agree. I mean, you're looking at a guy in Calvin Ridley. I mean, you look for guys at the receiver position, what really makes people stand out at the position? And yes, you can get the guys that get a ton of receptions. I mean, Calvin Ridley for his own right, 90 receptions is plenty good enough, tied for 13. We also look for guys that can score the ball. That was the problem as to why Julio's ceiling really was capped for all those years, because he was giving you 6-7 touchdowns per year. We saw Calvin Ridley in a year where he
scored 10 as a rookie.
He scored 10 as a rookie. I mean, again, last year, you're talking about the splits even without Julio. He was banged up in some of those games as well, not to mention. And he still put up 9 touchdowns, which is top 10 in the league. I think next year, he plays a full, healthy 16-game slate. Like 9 is his floor. He's shown it over his career. He can put the ball in the end zone. So I fully agree. I mean, this guy's a stud. He's currently my wide receiver 6, and he's your wide receiver 7. So wide receiver 6 consensus is what it equals to. Going into the next guy, I mean, it's another guy you're going to be talking about, and that's actually going to be none other than Justin Herbert's favorite target. Go take it away with him.
Yeah, Keenan Allen is a guy that is probably going to be undervalued in drafts, if I have to imagine, because he's an older player. Maybe some people have some fatigue with him, but Keenan Allen, once Justin Herbert took over the starting job, was absolutely fantastic for fantasy. So there was one game all season where Keenan Allen had less than 10 targets, if you exclude the Raiders and the Saints game, which the reason you exclude them is because Keenan Allen left early in the Saints game with an injury in like the second quarter. And then before the game against the Raiders, it was announced that he was going to be limited in that game. So the games where he was not limited by injury, he had over 10 targets in every game except for the Dolphins game, which he scored like 40 yards and a touchdown. So he still was fine for fantasy. The guy was just uber consistent. And the reason I have so much faith in him going forward is because if he is able to stay healthy, that offense is only going to improve. Brian Bulaga was hurt last year. They have they might draft a tackle as well. They're in a position in the draft where they could add a Christian Darrisaw or something like that. The defense is going to get healthier and probably create more takeaways and get off the field, get more 3-and-outs and stuff. As a result, with Derwin James coming back and Joey Bosa probably healthy next year, and I believe who is the linebacker that got hurt for them? Tranquil got hurt for them earlier in the season, who looked like he was going to be a breakout player before the season. I seriously believe that the Chargers could be one of the best teams in the AFC next year. With Justin Herbert under the helm, playing like he did last year, definitely could be taking a step forward in his second year. I think it's just always smart to attach yourself to that kind of situation, a situation that you have a gut feeling about or that you think is going to be a great team and a great offense. We will reevaluate this situation when their new coach is hired, because as of right now, they don't currently have a head coach. But the Chargers scored the 19th most most points in the NFL last year. So if the new coach is a good hire, or we believe it's a good hire, he should exceed that number with the talent available. With Austin Eckler not banged up this year, potentially. Mike Williams is going to be in a contract year. We know how some players play when they're in contract years. So I seriously think this Chargers offense is going to be very good next year, and Keenan Allen's going to be a big part of that.
Sure. I mean, this guy was the wide receiver 7 overall in PPR points per game. If you actually, again, take those splits with with only Justin Herbert, he only put up 7.7 PPR points with the one game with Tyrod Taylor. In the games with Justin Herbert, he put up 18.57 PPR points per game. If you actually relate that to the top receivers in the league on a PPR points per game basis, that actually would have ranked wide receiver 5, trailing only Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stefon Diggs, and Calvin Ridley. I mean, this guy has proven it time and time again, despite maybe not having that 12 to 14 touchdown upside of some of those guys that I mentioned. He is a consistent threat for 10, 11, 12 targets per game and is always going to be amongst the league leaders in receptions. Now he gets a top 10 quarterback talent to distribute him the ball. I fully agree. I mean, Keenan Allen, this may be the best Keenan Allen we've seen, and that's saying a lot considering in 2017 he was the wide receiver 3.
Yeah, this could be, and what you said about the touchdowns, that is really quarterback dependent when you think about it, right? We're going to talk about a guy a bit later that scored 14 touchdowns in 2015, but hasn't scored double-digit touchdowns since. And it's not because he's a bad receiver. In fact, he's performed with some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL, but it's usually tethered to quarterback play. You see the guys that threw a lot of touchdowns at the quarterback position, the Tom Brady's, the Patrick Mahomes, the Aaron Rodgerses this year, their receivers, their number one receivers, scored a lot of touchdowns as well. Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, Mike Evans. So having yourself, if we expect Justin Herbert to throw 35, 40 touchdowns next year, which I think he has the talent to do so, we can definitely expect Keenan Allen to get a good chunk of those.
Yep, fully agree. Speaking of touchdowns, the next guy that I'm going to be listing here, he knows how to put the ball in the dang end. I'm going to be talking about A.J. Brown, wide receiver from the Tennessee Titans. I mean, again, his PPR points per game output of 17.7 per game was actually the wide receiver 6 in 2020. So you're wondering, wait, talented young receiver, wide receiver 6, and now he's ranked wide receiver 8? I mean, let's talk about the positives before I get into that, because in 14 games that he played last year, he was a menace on the field. 80 receptions, 1,228 receiving yards, and 12.5 touchdowns across a 16-game pace, which is elite-type numbers. The reason why he falls down to 8 here is the potential concern of offensive coordinator Arthur Smith leaving. But again, I can't drop him any further than 8 given the talent he possesses. I mean, the touchdown potential on any given game, or heck, any given play that this guy has, I mean, it's unmatched really like in this tier 3, if you will. So A.J. Brown's the next guy, and again, 12.5 touchdowns across 60 games this year. Now gets another season to acclimate himself with Ryan Tannehill. I wouldn't be shocked if this guy is a perennial double-digit touchdown guy. And if that's the case, I mean, he's going to be a locked and loaded top 10 receiver really for the rest of his career.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Arthur Smith concerns. There's also some positives. The fact that Corey Davis is a free agent who had a career year and may have priced himself out of Tennessee. There might be a team that offers him a lot of money that he can't refuse. And not only that, but Jonnu Smith is a free agent too. So there's a chance that A.J. Brown is more alone in this offense, in this passing game, and gets more targets as a result. I've said this a million times before, but A.J. Brown had one game last year where he had double-digit targets. One game. Crazy. And he finished wide receiver 6. If A.J. Brown, let's say I think Corey Davis is the biggest threat to his targets. If Corey Davis goes elsewhere, maybe they re-sign Jonnu Smith or something, A.J. Brown is going to be a top 5 receiver if Corey Davis is gone. Because A.J. Brown, if he is getting 11, 12 targets a game, I will put him up against any NFL wide receiver for efficiency. Because if he gets 12 targets a game, I'll book him for 100 yards and 12 touchdowns. I will book him for that.
Think of it from a logical standpoint, okay? These are 12 really quality targets, first of all, from Ryan Tannehill, who's a fantastic, efficient quarterback in my own opinion. 12 targets from one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league for a guy that on any given touch can take it to the house. I mean, if he's getting 12 targets a game, 11, even 10 targets per game.
Put the ball in his hands as much as they feel like it, to be honest. They should run him on jet sweeps and throw him screen passes. Like the ball should never not touch A.J. Brown's hands on a drive. Like, I don't know why they don't throw him the ball more, because he literally makes magic happen every time he touches it.
Exactly. And again, like if this guy was averaging, let's just keep it minimal, let's say 9, 10 targets per game. I wouldn't be shocked if he was averaging a touchdown every game, because I mean, given that guy that amount of potential in any given game to make a play, he's just the guy that's going to make that play. And we've seen it time and time again. This guy's taking slants to the houses. This guy's mossing someone in the back of the end zone. I mean, A.J. Brown is just a physical freak that knows how to get the ball into the end zone. So can't value that enough. Wide receiver 8. Going to be talking about the next guy on our list at wide receiver 9. And
what you just said is actually a fact. It's a fact, what you just said. Every game that he's gotten at least 9 targets, he scored a touchdown in it.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking of the next guy on our list, our wide receiver 9 going into the season. I mean, this is the guy who's had the best rookie season amongst the position since one Odell Beckham Jr. back in 2014. He had to find his way into this top 10. And coming in at number 9, we got the one and only Justin Jefferson. I mean, he smashed the rookie wide receiver receiving record this year, en route to an 88 for 1,407 stat line across 16 games. And when you take in that he didn't really earn a full-time role until week 3, he only had 6 combined targets in week 1 and 2. Week 3 on, this kid averaged a remarkable 18.73 PPR points per game, which if you stretched across a full 16-game season, would have equated to
what we just said for Keenan Allen.
Would have equated to the wide receiver 5. So, I mean, betting on a talented kid coming off the best rookie season in NFL history, he easily earns his ranking inside our top 10 and is the last receiver in that tier 3, if you will, from, I believe it was Keenan down to him. So Jefferson absolutely deserves a spot, and there's going to be people that want to efficiency. It's got to go down, yada, yada. Don't fucking pay any attention to those guys, because in reality, Justin Jefferson is a motherfucking baller, and he can only go up from that rookie season. So Justin Jefferson, number 9, book it in.
Yeah, I have no problems with that. Justin Jefferson, you could probably make the argument that he might even be too low, because he only had 125 targets last year. Like, if he gets, which is crazy. And yeah, it's a run-heavy offense. It's probably going to stay a run-heavy-ish offense. But if Justin Jefferson gets 140 targets, similar to like Tyreek Hill type volume or whatever, this dude's going to smash for fantasy. And he could legitimately finish as like a top 3 wide receiver. I don't know if he gets into Davante Adams territory because of the target volume and all that kind of stuff and the touchdown volume. But Justin Jefferson has the possibility. We know Odell Beckham back in his prime was very capable of scoring 10, 12 touchdowns, not even on his quarterback's own efficiency, just on his own efficiency as a receiver, and because of how talented he is. And I wouldn't be shocked if next year Justin Jefferson has a 1,400-yard, 12-touchdown type season, and it's not even really because Kirk Cousins had that great of a season.
For sure. And I mean, talking about Justin Jefferson real quick, it's crazy to me that this guy really stepped in. He was on the COVID list in the offseason, didn't really get fully acclimated until week 3.
He was like the poster boy for like why the shortened offseason is going to affect rookie receivers. And he totally bucked that trend. It's kind of wild how hard the deck was stacked against him.
The Dak was stacked
against him.
Speaking of Dak, we'll mention him in a bit. But and again, we cited for Dalvin Cook as well. If Gary Kubiak were to retire this offseason, let's just play the hypothetical game again. This is the way too early rankings list. We don't have all this information available yet. But if Gary Kubiak was to hypothetically retire, I mean, the passing volume can only go up from where they were at last year. The passing volume can only go up for a guy who was the most efficient receiver since Odell Beckham Jr. from a rookie perspective. So Justin Jefferson, wheels up, get him on your teams.
Wow, we got some breaking news.
What happened?
So the Jets hired a coach.
Mike LaFleur?
They hired Robert Saleh, but Mike LaFleur is the offensive coordinator. So, the Jets are running a wide zone scheme. Oh, dude, let's get Travis Etienne in New York.
I'm down.
I'm down.
Are we going to cut this little bit of the video and make it a breaking news?
Absolutely not. We'll go over all the coaching stuff once everyone has been hired, and we'll go through everything.
Scratch that. Y'all didn't hear that. Anyways, who's the wide receiver 10, Corey?
All right, wide receiver 10. A guy I teased before who had a lot of productive seasons with bad quarterbacks, and that's Allen Robinson. He begins the tier 4 of wide receivers, a tier 4 that is absolutely massive, full of a lot of names. So if you have anyone else at wide receiver 10, or even like some of the guys that we have higher on the list, this position is super deep. It's super talented. It's super top heavy. It's super mid heavy. It's super late heavy. Like, the wide receiver position around the NFL for fantasy purposes is as deep as it's ever been. and is going to get deeper with, again, another talented rookie class coming in. I don't know if I'm assuming Allen Robinson is back in Chicago with this take that he's wide receiver 10 or not. But I think either way, this is where Allen Robinson belongs. Back end wide receiver 1, a guy who averages 15 PPR points per game on around 9 targets per game is exactly what you want out of a fringe wide receiver 1 that you're drafting in rounds 3, round 4. If he goes to a new team, that should really only mean good things for him, to be honest, because we've seen Allen Robinson play with Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky and all these crappy quarterbacks, Blake Bortles at the back half of his career in Jacksonville. His fantasy value, as we all know, Allen Robinson is not adverse to switching quarterbacks. So the wide receiver switching teams narrative really doesn't apply to him. Hopefully he can go to a situation, if he does go elsewhere from Chicago, or if he stays in Chicago, hopefully Chicago can upgrade their quarterback situation beyond Mitch Trubisky. Maybe Allen Robinson wants a reunion in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. Who knows? I know New York Giants fans are huge fans of bringing Allen Robinson for Daniel Jones. I actually don't hate that fit, to be honest. I think it does upgrade Allen Robinson slightly because I think the offense would be better with a healthy Saquon Barkley back and some of the tertiary receivers that the Giants have. I actually don't mind that, but either way, I got one for you. You don't think so?
No, I got one for you. What about going to be Deshaun Watson's wide receiver 1 in Miami?
Ooh, yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, that would be nice. That'd be definitely the best quarterback he's ever played with. But
100%.
Speaking of that, hopefully he can play with a better quarterback is basically my point. And that can help improve his touchdown ceiling, as I teased before. We saw in 2015, he scored 14 touchdowns in a season where Blake Bortles actually looked like he could be a franchise quarterback coming off of that season. So if Allen Robinson can get with a Deshaun Watson or get with Aaron Rodgers as his number 2 or get with like whoever, Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, this is a dude that is definitely capable of double-digit touchdowns, and we already know his yardage and target and reception floor.
100%. I mean, this guy's a bona fide stud. So, no, I fully agree. Again, he is currently my wide receiver 10, and he's your wide receiver 10. So, it makes sense why he's our consensus 10.
He might move up. If he were to go to Miami and Deshaun Watson was there, I'd probably move him up.
Top 7. Yeah, I fully agree. The next guy on our list is actually going to be my guy. You guys can see the jerseys behind me because he plays for my team, and that's going to be Amari Cooper, wide receiver from the Dallas Cowboys.
Before you accuse Danny of being biased and skewing this consensus ranking, I actually have him at 12, so I'm on board with this.
For sure, which is crazy because you're known as the Amari Cooper hater, but you've come to grips. I mean, I appreciate that. On the screen right now, you should see Amari Cooper splits in the games that Dak Prescott started and finished. So again, didn't have his 5th game on there because Dak Prescott got hurt at halftime, so it would have skewed the results. But again, those first 4 games when Dak played full games, Amari Cooper averaged 21.27 PPR points per game in that time frame, which, as I mentioned, would have been the wide receiver 3 across a full season. And his 12.75 targets and 9.25 receptions per game would have projected to 204 targets and 148 receptions across 16 games, which would have led the NFL in both categories. I mean, I don't expect Cooper nor this offense to put up the extremely high passing volume that we saw in that 4-game stretch because those easily would have smashed NFL records. I mean, Dak Prescott, heck, was averaging over 50
passes for like 6,000 yards.
He had over 50 passing attempts per game and almost 425 passing yards per game, and his pace was 804 passing attempts and 6,760 passing yards. So those numbers really aren't obtainable. But heck, even if we're getting Dak at 35, 40 passing attempts, which is pretty reasonable given how potent and how high volume this passing offense can be, I absolutely think that Amari Cooper can repeat as a top 12 receiver, given the situation, given the quarterback, and given the amount of scoring that this offense should see. So I'm fully on board. Amari Cooper is a bona fide stud, wide receiver 1 for Dak Prescott going into this year. Hopefully, Dak Prescott. We're
assuming that Dak Prescott is back in Dallas, which if they have any brain cells, they'll bring him back. So
I don't know what I would do if we didn't get Dak back, but
yeah,
assuming Dak is back, he's the wide receiver 11 consensus in our ranking. So there you
go. Yeah. We all know this is going to be an offense. If nothing else, if they don't keep the pace that they were on early in the season, if nothing else, this is a top 10 scoring offense, top 5 scoring passing offense. Yeah. And the wide receiver one of that offense is going to be valuable. And Amari Cooper, as much as we like CeeDee Lamb and as much as Michael Gallup can flash sometimes, it's Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is the wide receiver one on this team. He's being paid like the wide receiver one. He takes the number one corners, and he has definitely improved ever since he got to Dallas in terms of his inconsistencies that we saw from him in Oakland. So from one of your favorite team to my favorite team, wide receiver 12, Mike Evans. Pretty much everything that could have went wrong for Mike Evans this year did. And yet he still was able to string together mostly a full season in which he finished as a very solid fantasy wide receiver. He basically, going into the season, what we always talk about in training camp is if someone gets injured in August, it's not a good sign, especially hamstring injury. And that is exactly what happened to Mike Evans. And you can look no further than San Francisco with Deebo Samuel if you know what we mean. If you drafted Deebo Samuel coming off of injury going into the season, you know that you really did not get your money's worth when you drafted him. The same thing, the same exact fate could have very well been true for Mike Evans. But he had numerous games right off the jump against New Orleans and Chicago specifically, where he was essentially a decoy because he could barely walk because he busted his hamstring in training camp. For a receiver who basically we would have told you in August to avoid, he actually bounced back towards the end of the season and missed very little time. And that is absolutely remarkable. And as I mentioned, look at Deebo Samuel for the opposite perspective of what probably should have happened to Mike Evans, given what happened to him in the offseason. He had a new quarterback too, which is also another thing that he had to overcome, whom he had to develop chemistry with. The offense was not consistent early in the season, became more consistent towards the back half of the season. I believe that this offense going into the second year of Bruce Arians' system, a year in which Brady already threw 40 touchdowns, his ceiling is even higher than that next year. And not to mention that Chris Godwin, his number two receiver on the other side, was also completely not healthy last year. And him being on the field just makes this offense that much better. I think Mike Evans' involvement and chemistry with Brady on deep plays and in the red zone makes him a perfect high-end wide receiver 2 type next year to pair with another wide receiver 1 and potentially 2 other running backs as like a 4th-round pick. Because I think this offense can be even better despite the 40 touchdowns that Tom Brady threw last year and the franchise record in points scored that they scored this season. As I mentioned, Mike Evans' splits on the screen right now. You'll see the back half of the season after week 8, he scored 17.12 PPR points per game on really only 8 targets a game. It's because and honestly, he wasn't even really scoring that many more touchdowns than he did before. It was just a matter of chemistry. You see it was 1.5 receptions more. And the targets were there and the yardage was a lot better. So Mike Evans, basically what I'm expecting, he is the number 1 receiver in this offense. You've seen it develop all season and in the playoffs. The first playoff game that they had, he had 100 yards. He's Brady's favorite target. And you can tell even over Antonio Brown. So I think Antonio Brown or Chris Godwin, both are free agents next year. One of them is going to be gone. I don't know which one, probably Brown. But either way, Mike Evans is a guy that I am buying next year in fantasy. He's a top 12 receiver for me. He has double-digit touchdown upside, locked and loaded, 1,000 yards, got 1,000 yards all 7 years of his career, which is an NFL record so far. He's pretty much as safe as they come, in my opinion. For sure.
The honorable mentions, people are probably wondering right now about a couple guys. Oh, this guy's got to be on that list. That guy's got to be on the list. We got a lot of those comments on the RB rankings video. But
yeah, someone will probably comment that James Robinson's not on this list too.
They'll find a way. But honorable mentions on this is going to be Michael Thomas, who's
our wide receiver 13, by the way. He just missed the cut.
Yeah, I had him at 12. You had him at 13, so he was right on the fringe there. Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, Kenny Golladay, and Julio Jones are the next in line. So
and all those guys have their own concerns. They're all great fantasy assets still. Michael Thomas' biggest concern is the fact that Drew Brees is probably gone. Terry McLaurin has a murky quarterback situation as well. Chris Godwin's a free agent. Don't know what's going to happen with him. Deontay Johnson, same thing as Michael Thomas. We don't know if Ben's coming back. We don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be like there. We don't know if Juju's coming back as well. Kenny Golladay, again, murky quarterback situation. Julio Jones might not even be an Atlanta Falcons. So there's a lot of guys right after this kind of area of receivers that we could have included in here. And even more so, we could have included the Rams receivers. We could have included some of the other younger guys like Ayuk and Higgins and CeeDee Lamb. But we don't think they're top 12 material just yet. So these are preliminary top 12. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys did enjoy this, comment any of your thoughts down below, what you agree, disagree with, maybe your own top 12 rankings. I know Spicy Hot threw his running backs in the comments last time. So if you guys want to throw your own top 12s in, feel free to do that. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Danny, you can go ahead with whatever you have to say.
I was just going to mention, I mean, we love hearing the insight that you guys bring in the comments. A lot of you guys informed opinions, leaving your comments on below. We love interacting with you guys with that. So again, do you have any differentiations, anything you want to say? Leave it in the comments. We're going to interact. We're going to respond to you guys. Well, heck, we've had some nice informed debates in our comments before with you guys. So love doing that. And again, as Corey mentioned, if you're new to the channel, what's stopping you from hitting that subscribe button? You're seeing we're closing in on that 2.5 thousand subscriber barrier. Make sure you're in that exclusive group. Make sure you're in that. Don't just say, oh yeah, I was
exclusive groups too. Join the Discord. This is the time of season when we get into dynasty talk and all that kind of stuff. The Discord is going to be a place that we're much more active in now that we're not working on in-season content and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you guys are in the Discord in case you guys are into startups. Maybe you can find some people in there to work on a dynasty startup with. Maybe you've never played dynasty. Maybe you just need dynasty advice. All that kind of stuff will be in the Discord, and we're going to continue to use that going into the offseason. And again, leave any of your ideas for what kind of shows you want to see us do in the comments section. Before this is going to be the longest outro of all time. Do you have anything else before we get out of here?
I'm going to say one thing. Again, as always, if you're watching, smash that like button, because you know why? Why, Corey? Why?
YouTube algorithm.
It helps with the YouTube algorithm. All right, we're going to head out of here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out, y'all.